How do you feel about where you live? Do you feel invested in how the area looks? Are you the kind of person who checks the council website to know what kind of chaos a bank holiday has wrought on bin day? Do you feel listened to by a council? Like your voice matters? All that comes under civic engagement. And it's just one more thing AI could change.
My name is Linda Tyrrell. I live in Aintree. I'm an old lady. I call myself a technophobe because technology just frightened me. I'm so heavy-handed I can break anything. And it just scared me because so much is online that if you made the mistake, you could lose everything.
I am science communicator, actor and Liverpudlian Stephen McGann. And this is AI and Us, the series exploring how AI is changing the fabric of the world, with Liverpool leading the charge to understand and harness its power.
That was the way I thought of it. If you lost your phone, you'd lose everything if your life was on your phone or your tablet. And that's what frightened me.
In this episode, I'm going to find out, from experts and real people, how this increasingly available technology could impact civic engagement, how people can have a say in what happens in their local community and national government. But using AI requires people to be online, part of our digital society. And that is less prevalent than we might think.
Government is pushing and pushing and pushing at all levels, from local government to national governments, to move systems online. Everything from benefits to car tax to interacting with the school to getting healthcare is now digitised.
That's Simeon Yates, Professor of Digital Culture at the University of Liverpool. Since 2015, over 6,000 branches of banks and building societies have closed. 63% of the branches that were open a decade ago. It's part of the push to move people to online banking. Cheaper to run and potentially more convenient for customers. But only the ones with smartphones and reliable internet access. It's the same for local councils. But what does this mean for the many people who aren't online very much? Or at all?
And I was a teacher for 32 years, quite happy with a piece of chalk. And when they said, we're going to have a paperless department, everything online, your reports online, your lessons online, everything online, I was so nervous about it. By pressing the wrong button, you could lose everything. I started to do my reports online, and I did press the wrong button. And I did panic. And then somebody would just come along and press the right button, and everything was there. But when my head of department said, everything online, I was too nervous to do it. I took early retirement.
We'll hear more from Linda later. Now, you're listening to this podcast, so we can be reasonably sure that you're part of the digital society. You probably do some shopping online, maybe listen to music or watch telly from a digital streaming service. But Linda, and people like her, really raise the question for all of us. In a society that is increasingly digital, what do we need everyone to have to ensure everyone is part of that digital society? One of Simeon Yates's projects has been about figuring out what exactly is the minimum digital living standard.
A lot of what we do is around digital inclusion and exclusion. So in other words, the people who are not getting the benefits of being in our digital society. Now, they may be completely digitally disconnected. So they may be people who don't have access to broadband or a mobile phone or whatever, or a smartphone. But they also may be people who have low digital skills or whose access is intermittent, people who've got smartphone only access and may lose data at some point in a month. So what we're actually interested in is the ways in which that lack of access, lack of skills impacts on their day-to-day lives, and how those inequalities play out across different aspects of society. There's a lot of people in society with low digital skills, with low digital access because of things like poverty, health, levels of education, employment opportunities, and so on. So when we look at the big picture, what we find is that not everybody gets to play the same in our kind of digital world. And in particular, how people fall short in terms of what they need in order to live a reasonable quality of life, for their kids to get a reasonable education, for them to get access to healthcare and so on. What do you actually need? There's an issue of kit and access. So have you got broadband? Have you got a mobile, signal, etc.? Have you got a smartphone? Then there's another level, which is you need the skills to use those things. You need to know how to turn them on. You need to know how to set up things. You need to have skills to use them on a day-to-day basis. And then there's a third level, which is, well, how do you do that safely? How do you do that so you don't get scammed? How do you understand that if I share this data, what will happen to it? How do you understand what to do if what you find online is problematic or is content that shouldn't be there? How do you know what to do as a digital citizen, as somebody living in a digital space to do that? And quite worryingly, we find that effectively 45% of households with kids in the UK don't meet a standard, and around 10% of them are falling down on equipment, and a slightly larger percentage are falling down on basic skills, and an even bigger percentage are falling down on those critical and safety skills. Close to 60%, 50% of the UK workforce don't have the full set of essential digital skills for work.
There are organisations throughout the UK working to bring everyone in society up to this minimum standard. The Liverpool City region has a digital inclusion network where volunteers and staff help people to get the kit and the skills they need to get online. They often have basic tablets, and sometimes they even have what's called a data bank, so they can help people who otherwise can't afford internet access. Linda got involved with the Fazakerley Digital Inclusion Hub through the library. She was given a tablet and training on how to use it.
There is so much I can do now with my tablet that I never dreamt I'd be able to do. I do a clubber activity every single day, and I'm able to link my tablet with my activities. So I've got my crochet patterns. I do slow cooker and air fryer recipes and get them all online on my tablet. I do Spanish on a Thursday. I've got Duolingo. I do dance on a Tuesday, and I can look at my sequence dancing and line dancing on it. I do Libby, which is an online library service, which is very, very useful because you can get audio books or read your book on the tablet, and I use it mainly for the audio books. I love it.
And she even uses it for her health, using the NHS Patient Access app.
I do Patients Access, which is very useful for keeping track of your records and getting prescriptions. I could speak for ages on it because it's just changed my life completely.
Now, getting digitally kitted out and enabled is a good first step. But how can data and AI impact our civic engagement? What does data or artificial intelligence have to do with me as a citizen of the UK?
One of the key definitions of citizenship is to be able to make claims, to act, to demand from your politicians, from your civic leaders, from your civic organisations, and even from commercial and other organisations, rights. These are my rights. They may be formally encoded rights, or they just might be reasonable rights to demand. So when we talk about being a digital citizen, we're really thinking about how do they engage with their civic organisations, and as part of that, there's a digital component, and they need to understand that in order to act. So, for example, going to your local government and saying, well, look, you've got all this data on our community about our health or whatever. Well, can we work with you to use that, all that digital content you've got, to improve our civic environment?
Linda herself has been more civically involved since she's got online.
A while ago, the traffic lights were off at the beginning of a very busy road. And we all said, how do you cross this road without the lights being on? And somebody said, get online, tell your council the lights aren't working. So I did that. We did it as a group. And the lights came on. And you could safely cross the road. I wouldn't have done anything before with the lights being off because I didn't know what to do. I mean, who do you ask? There's nobody ever around, is there? So I wouldn't have done anything. But thanks to going online, the lights came on.
Gary Leeming, Director of the Civic Data Cooperative in Liverpool, believes AI could really help people to be more involved and engaged with civic life in ways we've never been before.
Because artificial intelligence is something new, and because, in all honesty, we don't understand all of the impacts that it could have on our lives, it can be quite scary. And it comes with a lot of questions about what is safe and how do we preserve our own privacy through the use of these data sets and how they're collected. But we shouldn't ignore the enormous opportunities that it also comes with. We've got the tools to be able to help us to interact with or summarise information in meetings that the local council's having about our area in a way that makes it easier for us to read.
Actually get a sense of what happens at council meetings without having to go. Now that does sound useful.
An opportunity for AI is to help us to improve civic engagement, the way that we interact with the services and democratic processes that operate all around us. Many council services can be quite opaque to us. Also, often they don't interact amongst themselves, particularly between different areas. So if we live on a border area, we may have a range of options around schools or around healthcare and events. But it can be quite difficult to kind of bring that information together in a way that helps us to understand it, where each website is slightly different, stores information in a different format, hides it in different ways by accident, or calls things different names.
Yes, it drives me crazy. I'm sure you've noticed many websites now hide the contact information. Every council website is designed by a different organisation, and it can be very difficult to figure out where the information I need might be.
The opportunity for AI is very much, I think, in helping us to ourselves bring those data sets together to kind of create an online or a digital experience, a digital commons that we can explore for ourselves that better reflects the availability of services within our own lives, to look at how we can use artificial intelligence to allow you to interact with that data without any specialist knowledge, to be able to ask a question of it, whether that's an investigation as to your local school's performance or to look at what green spaces are available. So if we're interested in understanding what's planned to happen with those green spaces across those different councils as well, we can then use these tools to bring that data together, understand it for ourselves, and then potentially use that to help to advocate for our own community. And so there is a huge opportunity for almost like the democratization of some of this knowledge in a way that's never happened before.
AI, artificial intelligence, bringing about democratization. It's a lofty goal. But Gary isn't alone in believing AI could genuinely be used for good. Reema Patel is the co-founder of the Ada Lovelace Institute, an organisation devoted to ensuring data and AI work for people and society. She's also on the management team of the Digital Good Network.
Can AI be used for good? Yes, but all these other conditions, such as trustworthiness and the sense of safeguarding the data, also need to be in place. Historically, we have not been very good at providing people with that sense of public confidence in the governance of their data.
So much now of how our society runs sits on systems, and we interact with those, that if you don't have an understanding of what's going on behind them, it's very hard to say, well, a minute, I'm not sure I agree with that. So if people don't have some understanding of how that works, how can they act? How can they, make change in their community? So that's what we mean by digital citizenship. And sadly, what we find is, of course, that people are very aware that things have become very digital, that their data is being used by all sorts of organizations, but they don't really know how to act to do anything about it. And that's where it breaks down.
At the moment, it feels like it's still very top down, and there's a heavy reliance on the assumption that people won't really understand how AI is impacting upon them. But as we see more and more awareness and literacy, I think that we will start to see people campaigning much more, trying to influence and shape the way government works and operates. People will have their say, no matter what. So we're at this sort of critical juncture point where we need to make some key decisions about how we're governing and using and applying AI. It truly is to have an impact on our lives and shape better or more positive outcomes.
And the tricky thing is, AI has a lot of problems. It's not magically going to solve the underlying issues in our society.
A lot of these predictive models are only as good as the data you put in them. So if the data is biased, and a lot of data is biased because the world is biased, then the results they come up with are biased. So if you have a lot of data that says people from a certain community are more likely to commit crime, and you train a system on it, it will predict that people from that community are more likely to commit crime. So one of the real worries is, given the biases in data in the way that AI are trained, given some of the challenges around using this new technology effectively, that they could make inequalities worse. The solutions they're offering could not necessarily deliver the benefits we hope. And there is quite a lot of documented evidence that with the best will in the world and all the right intentions, the poor implementation of these systems can create further forms of inequity.
And what's surprising is that even people who aren't online are still actually creating a lot of digital data.
Obviously, those people who do more things online leave more data online. However, that doesn't mean the people who are offline don't have digital footprints, because they fill in benefit forms, they go to the doctors, they go to hospitals, they still live life, and all of those interactions leave a digital trace. Benefits forms and other things can collect a vast amount of data about individuals and their lives, and often they're in ill health, so their health records are leaving lots of data. Those of us who are very digitally active, we're probably leaving an awful lot of data about what we bought from the online supermarket. Wherever you look, everybody's leaving data traces. One of the interesting challenges then is, well, how do we make sure that that benefits the people who created it? Civic data about people's everyday lives held by the state, well, I think there's even more of a moral imperative that should be in some way available to and reusable by communities. And that's where there is a challenge, because of course that needs a lot of digital skills, data skills to be able to get access to that data and use it. But I do think that conversation about more civic use of data, and maybe use of AI to help people use their data more civically, etc., is a really important conversation. Because in the end, and this goes back to the training of the AIs, a lot of this stuff is our data. It's stuff about me. It is my data. It is data about me that I have generated. So there has to be rights over it. And again, the issue here being we have got some rights, GDPR, other types of rights, but they're very difficult to enact, to demand that, what is done with things. So again, I think one of the kind of more beneficial futures is one in where people are much more involved with what happens with all of those traces they leave behind.
But creating that future sometimes feels like an insurmountable problem. At the moment, data is considered a commodity, a resource that companies take to make profit from, or something that government collects to use in unclear, maybe sinister ways. How could we think about data differently? Not as a commodity to be sold and exploited, but as something else entirely. Here's Rima Patel again.
There are three really important mechanisms or ways we can enable AI for public benefit. One is around changing the way we think about AI and data itself, and realising that it shouldn't just be for profit or for enclosure or for monetization. That tends to be where we see the use of data and AI predominantly to sell us products and services. Actually, there's something really important about access to data so that we can tackle some of these social problems. And that means that we need to reframe data and AI so it's not about making money, but it is about changing the world for the better. The second lever relates to good governance and regulation. Unless we feel confident that the harms are being prevented, it will be really hard to feel confident that we can realise good and positive and beneficial things. And then also we need to democratise access to data and AI.
Now, what we're talking about here, making data work for the good of us all, raises another question. Is AI good for the planet? Because, as Gary Leeming from the Liverpool Civic Data Cooperative explained, it comes at a huge resource cost.
AI uses a lot of computation. It uses a lot of electricity. It's not necessarily good for the environment. And we can't ignore that. And I think even while we see greater efficiencies in how some of these models can be generated, that still doesn't necessarily slow down the growth in how we're using these and developing these models, because all it means is that we can apply it to those faster chips and continue to grow again exponentially. And it's not even just about the generation of electricity. The other parts of the environmental question are, we use a lot of rare earth metals. We use a lot of components within our data centers that have to be mined. And so we're having an impact not just in terms of pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, but also in terms of the pollution that can be caused from just creating batteries or creating specialist sensors or other types of indicators. I think hopefully through the work that we do in terms of promoting a different attitude towards how we use and share and encourage people to think about data, that we can promote people to challenge both themselves and companies and governments to reduce their impact on the wider world.
So we need policy for what doing good with AI looks like.
Emily Rempel, a research fellow with the Civic Data Cooperative.
Because without it, we're kind of in the Wild West. Companies can come and use a bunch of data about the region, build these awesome AI models, all doing quote-unquote AI for good, which is something, as an organization, we very much support. But there's then no reason for them to have those technologies actually create positive societal benefit. And we want the AI produced here to benefit the people who live here. So when you have a large company that wants to come into the Liverpool City region and do a data or AI project linking, getting access to data, right now, there is no policy guiding what they do outside of, say, GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. So without some kind of guidelines, without policy, the benefits from data and AI won't be realized because they'll just be used by large companies to create profit for themselves without thinking about what good and quality and beneficial uses of data and AI look like for people in the region. And without some kind of policy to rein that in, essentially we're saying that the powerful get to govern themselves. And that's just not acceptable because they don't.
And that policy will need to be driven by us, by real people, to ensure the benefits of the data and AI revolution really work for us.
For me, I think the most important thing that we should be thinking about when it comes to AI as a society is to recognise that it's up to all of us to decide how these technologies are used. And it's up to all of us to really decide how we are bringing these tools into our lives and how we're using them, particularly in terms of how we interact as a civic society. Are we as human beings able to interact, to use these tools to support us in the lives that we want to live, to make us better as individuals, absolutely, but in a way that is aligned to our own expectations, our own sense of dignity, our own sense of what is right for us.
In the next episode of AI and Us, The Future in Our Hands, we'll be looking at how AI can impact social care, the way society looks after its most vulnerable, including the elderly and children in care. Do join me, Stephen McGann, for the next episode of AI and Us, The Future in Our Hands. AI and Us was written and produced by Nija Dalal-Small. The executive producer was Ailsa Rochester. AI and Us was an Audio Always production made in collaboration with the University of Liverpool's Civic Data Cooperative.